The freezing rain had soaked clean through my good wool coat by the time I got back from the cemetery, and my hands were still shaking. Not from cold, though it was the kind of February afternoon that gets into your knuckles, but because an hour earlier I had stood at the edge of a grave in Wexbridge and watched them lower the only person in that family who had ever truly seen me into the frozen ground. So when I came up the front steps of the farmhouse, fumbling for my keys, and found the door already unlocked, I thought for half a second that one of the neighbors had come by with a casserole. Instead, I walked into my own kitchen and found my brother-in-law sitting at the head of the table in my mother-in-law's chair, my sister-in-law beside him, and a man I had never laid eyes on before, in a suit too sharp for our part of the county, with a leather folder open in front of him. Nobody stood up. That was the first thing I noticed. You stand up when a woman walks in soaking wet from burying her mother-in-law. You take her coat. You put the kettle on. None of them moved. "You're back," my brother-in-law said. "Russell?" He'd hardly come around in the last 3 years, and here he was sitting like he'd grown out of that chair. "Good. We need to get this over with while we're all together." "Can I take my boots off at least?" I said. There was a puddle forming on the floor Eunice used to mop every single morning, even at the end, even when she could only do it leaning on the counter with one hand. My sister-in-law answered before he could. "Lorna." She still had her sunglasses pushed up in her hair. "Indoors, in February. This won't take long," she said, and she opened a manila envelope and slid a few pages across the table toward the empty chair, the only empty chair left, the little caned one by the wall, the one nobody sat in because it wobbled. I sat in it anyway. I'd been making myself small in that family for 19 years. One more time wouldn't kill me. The man in the suit cleared his throat and introduced himself as Mr. Kidder. Taverner said he was a solicitor out of Peterborough, and that he was there to read the last will and testament of the late Eunice, and he said her full name the way strangers do, all 3 parts, like she was a deed and not a person who used to hum hymns while she snapped beans. He read that the house and the 40 acres were to go to her 2 surviving children, my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, to be split between them. He read that her savings, somewhere around $600,000 between the RRSPs and the credit union, were likewise to be divided between the 2 of them, and then he got to me. "To my daughter-in-law," he read, not looking up, "I leave the sum of $8,000 in recognition of her assistance." In recognition of her assistance. I want to tell you exactly what $8,000 was supposed to recognize. It was supposed to recognize the 11 years I cared for that woman after her first stroke. The mornings I got up at 2 and again at 4 to turn her so she wouldn't get bed sores. The winter I quit my job at the dental office in town because Russell said on the phone from Calgary that his mother needed family and not a stranger from an agency, and then never sent a dime toward the family who was actually there. The chemo appointments I drove her to in the truck because the ambulance copay added up. The nights I sat on the floor of the bathroom holding her hair, what was left of it while she was sick. The mornings I spooned applesauce into her because she couldn't manage a fork anymore and she'd squeeze my hand and say I was the daughter she should have had. 11 years. $8,000. About what they'd spent, the 2 of them, on the catered lunch for the reception they hadn't bothered to invite me to plan. "That's not what she wanted," I said. My own voice sounded far away. "Eunice told me. We talked about this. She said the house was to be mine. She said it more than once." "Mom was on a lot of medication at the end," Russell said, with the patience of a man explaining something to a child. "She wasn't herself. You of all people know that." "She was herself," I said. "She was clearer than you've been in years." Lorna tapped the pages with one long fingernail. "It's right here. Signed. Witnessed. The whole thing. I found it in her dresser, in with her pills. Mr. Taverner's gone over it. It's airtight." The solicitor folded his hands. "I'm to inform you," he said, "that as you have no ownership interest in the property, the estate is requesting that you vacate. We're prepared to be reasonable. You have until the end of the month." The end of the month. It was the 19th. I looked around that kitchen. The cuckoo clock Murray bought his mother for some anniversary back before he died. The dent in the doorframe where I'd caught it with the wheelchair the day they discharged her after the second stroke. The window over the sink where Eunice could see the bird feeder. The one I kept filled all winter so she'd have the chickadees to watch when she couldn't get out of bed. My whole adult married life and then my whole widowhood had happened inside these walls, and 3 people I was related to by paper were telling me I had 11 days. I'll be honest with you. Everything in me wanted to start screaming. I wanted to flip that table. I wanted to tell Russell exactly where he'd been the night his mother couldn't remember my name or his, when she gripped my wrist at 3 in the morning and begged me not to let them put her in a home. I wanted to tell Lorna that the last time her mother saw her was a 40-minute visit at Christmas, 14 months back, and that Eunice had cried after she left. But I didn't. And I want you to understand why, because it's the only thing I'm proud of from that whole terrible day. You learn something, caring for a dying person for over a decade. You learn that you cannot win every fight at the moment it's picked. Sometimes the smartest, strongest thing a person can do is go quiet and wait and take stock. So I stood up out of that wobbly little chair and I said, "All right, I understand." The 3 of them looked genuinely surprised. I think they'd braced for a scene. I think Lorna was a little disappointed not to get one. I went upstairs to the bedroom that had been mine since Murray and I moved into this house to care for his mother, and I pulled my suitcase down off the closet shelf, and I started to pack. I packed slowly and I packed deliberately, my clothes, the few pieces of jewelry I owned, including the little garnet ring Eunice had pressed on me the Christmas before last, the photo albums, the real ones, the paper ones, because Russell had said weeks ago that he was going to scan everything and toss the rest. And then, from the very bottom of my underwear drawer, where it had been sitting for 11 days, I took out the envelope. Eunice had given it to me 3 days before she passed. She'd had one of her clear afternoons. They came less and less near the end. But they came, and she'd waved me over to the bed and gripped my wrist with a strength I didn't know was left in her. "My children are not good people," she'd said. "I know it now. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." "Don't talk like that," I'd told her, smoothing the blanket. "They're just busy. People get busy. Stop defending them." Her eyes were sharp that day, sharp as they'd been the first day I met her. "You defend everyone but yourself. It's time somebody stood up for you for once." And she'd reached under her pillow and brought out this plain white envelope and folded my hand around it. "Don't open it until I'm gone. Promise me that. Promise me you'll wait." I'd promised, and God help me, I'd kept it. Even at the funeral, with everything in me screaming, I had kept that promise. The envelope went into the bottom of the suitcase, still sealed, and I carried it past the 3 of them at the kitchen table and out into the freezing rain without another word. There's a motel out on Highway 7, the kind with the doors that open right onto the parking lot, and a vending machine only takes loonies. I got a room with a heater that rattled like it had gravel in it and a smell of cigarettes that 40 years of no smoking signs hadn't shifted. I paid for 2 weeks up front out of the $8,000 Lorna had transferred to my account that very evening. She was efficient, I'll give her that, when efficiency suited her. 11 years of my life, deposited by e-transfer with the memo line left blank. I bought groceries at the Foodland in the next town over, so I wouldn't run into anybody I knew. And I ate soup heated in the microwave, and I lay awake under a thin polyester blanket listening to transport trucks go by on the highway. On the 3rd night, I opened the envelope. Inside, there was a small brass key with a paper tag, and the tag said, in Eunice's handwriting, that shaky slanting hand she'd had since the first stroke, "Safety deposit, the credit union, Wexbridge." And there was a note, folded twice. "My dear girl," it read. "I know my own children. I prepared for them. The real will is in the box, and so is more besides. Take it all to Lionel Cormier. His office is above the pharmacy on Mill Street. His number is on the back of this paper. I am so sorry you have had to sit through whatever they've put you through. You have deserved so much better from this family than this family ever gave you. With all my love and with shame for what mine has become, your Eunice." I sat on the edge of that sagging motel bed for the longest time, holding the note, the heater rattling, my chest doing something I didn't have a word for. Then I picked up the phone. Lionel Cormier's office was up a narrow flight of stairs above the pharmacy, exactly where she'd said, with frosted glass in the door and his name in gold letters that had been there long enough to start flaking. He was 80 if he was a day, with hearing aids in both ears and a handshake like a vise. And when I came in, he said, "Ah, you'd be the daughter-in-law. She told me you'd come. Sit down, sit down. Kettle's just boiled." He made me a cup of tea in a mug that said "World's Okayest Golfer." And then he took the brass key, and we walked over to the credit union together, the two of us, an old man and a tired woman, picking our way around the snowbanks on Mill Street. The clerk took us back to the vault and left us with the box. Inside, with a thick envelope, sealed and signed across the flap, a USB stick in a little plastic case, and a folder, a fat one, the accordion kind, stuffed full. "This, Mr. Manny," Cormier said, opening the envelope with a letter knife, "is Eunice's actual will, drawn up in my office last June. Witnessed by myself and my paralegal, notarized and a copy filed with the registry. There is nothing your in-laws can do to it. It is solid as the Canadian Shield." He put on his glasses and read it to me, and I'm going to tell you what it said because I still hardly believe it. The house and the 40 acres were left to me. The savings, all of it, every dollar in the RRSPs and the credit union, were left to me. To her son and her daughter, Eunice left $25,000 each, and here Mr. Cormier paused and looked at me over the top of his glasses, on one condition. There is what we call a no-contest clause. If either of them challenges this will, or is found to have attempted to defraud the estate, they forfeit their $25,000 entirely. They get nothing. "They already have a will," I said. "Lorna showed me. There was a lawyer and everything." "There was no other will," he said quietly. "I'd stake my license on it. What your sister-in-law showed you is a forgery, and forging a will, my dear, is not a family squabble. It's a criminal offense under the code. So is fraud over $5,000. He set the pages down. Eunice was afraid of exactly this. That's why she did the next part. He plugged the USB stick into an old laptop and turned the screen so I could see, and there she was, Eunice. In this very office, I recognized Mr. Fun, Cormier's bookshelves behind her, sitting up straight in the blue cardigan. I'd knit her 2 winters before, the one I thought she only wore to humor me. She looked tired. She looked thin, but her eyes were clear. Clear as that last good afternoon. "My name is Eunice," she said to the camera, and gave her full name and her date of birth, and said she was of sound mind, and Mr. Cormier off camera confirmed the date. And then she folded her hands on the desk, just the way she used to fold them on the kitchen table when she was about to say something she'd thought hard about. "I have 2 children," she said. "I love them. A mother always does, no matter what. But I am not blind to who they've become. They visit at Christmas if it's convenient. They phone when they want something. When I had my first stroke and needed somebody every day for the rest of my life, neither one of them so much as offered." Her voice wobbled and then steadied. "It was my daughter-in-law who came. My son's widow, who had no obligation to me at all, who could have walked away after I lost my boy and nobody would have blamed her. She didn't walk away. She gave up her work. She gave up her own life. She bathed me and fed me and sat with me through things no one should have to see, and she never once made me feel like a burden, even when I knew I was one." She looked straight down the lens then, straight at me, across however many months it had been. "Everything I have goes to her. The house is hers. She's earned that house 10 times over. The money is hers. It won't begin to pay her back. But it's what I've got to give. I'm leaving my children a little because they are my children. But if either of them tries to take from her what is hers, if they lie or cheat or forge so much as my signature, then they are to get nothing at all. And I want it on the record that I expected them to try." A small, sad smile. "I hope I'm wrong about them. I'm so often not." The recording ended. I realized I'd stopped breathing. "There's more," Mr. Cormier said gently, and he slid the accordion folder toward me. "She kept a journal, every missed visit, every promise broken, every time one of them phoned to ask for help with money but couldn't spare a weekend. She kept the dates, and these," he tapped a section of it, "are statements from the home care nurses and the hospice workers. Every one of them says the same thing, that you were the only family in that house. She has receipts, too, for the medications you paid out of pocket when your brother-in-law swore the insurance had it covered and it didn't." "I never kept track of any of that," I said. My voice had gone thin. "No," he said. "She knew you wouldn't. She knew you'd never fight for yourself, so she sat in that chair, sick as she was, and she fought for you instead. I asked him what happened now. Now, he said, leaning back, I filed a genuine will with the court. I notify everyone named in it, and I'd strongly advise your brother-in-law and your sister-in-law to take their $25,000 each and be grateful. Because if they fight, they lose everything, and if the police get hold of that forged document. He shrugged. Well, forgery, fraud, attempting to defraud an estate, those are not small words. Some people go to prison for them. I went to the OPP detachment the next morning, and I made a statement. The constable who took it was a woman about my own age, with steady hands and tired, kind eyes, and she typed up every word I said and asked me at the end whether I still had the forged will in my possession. No, I said. My sister-in-law kept that. That's all right. We'll obtain it. In the meantime, she looked at me carefully. Don't contact either of them. Don't go to the property. Let us handle it from here. 3 days later, I was carrying boxes back into my own kitchen in my own house, legally and completely, with the cuckoo clock ticking and the chickadees back at the feeder I'd filled again, when 2 OPP cruisers came up the lane, lights off, slow over the gravel. I stood at the window over the sink and I watched 2 officers go up the front steps and knock. Russell answered. He and Lorna had let themselves in to start going through Eunice's things to sell. I learned later. I watched his face change when they showed him their badges. They arrested the 2 of them right there on the front porch of the house that had never for 1 minute been theirs. My son called me that night. Trent. He'd flown in from out west for the funeral and flown right back without saying 10 words to me, because his uncle had told him I was just upset, that I was making it hard on everybody, that Grandma had wanted things the way they were. Mom, he said, and his voice was small, the way it used to be when he was a boy and he'd done something he was scared to admit. Uncle Russ got arrested. Aunt Lorna, too. They're saying it was all fake. The will. Did you see the will they showed everyone? I asked. Yeah. Uncle Russ showed me on his phone. I thought, Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought it was real. I thought you were just grieving. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. You didn't make it with them? No, Mom. I'd never. I just believed him. He's my uncle. He was crying now. I should have called you. I should have asked you. I should have come to see your grandmother when she was dying, I said. I didn't say it to wound him. I said it because it was true and because somebody had to. You should have phoned her more than twice a year. You should have offered to sit with her one single night so your mother could sleep. There was a long silence on the line. But you were a long way away, I said more gently. And they told you everything was fine, that I was fine, that Grandma was fine, so you believed the people who were lying to you. I understand how that happens. I do. I'm so sorry, he said again. Your grandmother left you something, I told him, because it was true and because he should hear it from me. Not much, but something. There's a small trust. You'll have access when you turn 30. Use it well. She put it in for him because, whatever his faults, he was hers, and she was a better forgiver than I will ever be. The court business took the better part of 3 months. In the end, the 2 of them pleaded out. Their own lawyer told them they hadn't a leg to stand on, not against a notarized will, a video, a journal, and a stack of nurses' statements. Russell got 18 months. Lorna got a year. The local paper ran it, of course. Small town that we are, with both their names, and Lorna's little online business. She sold candles and wellness things, the kind of life she liked to photograph, quietly disappeared off the internet inside a week. I didn't go to the sentencing. I'd had enough of sitting in rooms while people decided my fate. Instead, I stayed home and I started, slowly, to live in the house like it was mine because it was. Trent began to drive out on weekends once he'd moved back east. The first few visits were awful, if I'm honest. We'd sit in the front room with cups of tea going cold between us and neither of us knowing what on earth to say. But you learn, the way I'd learned everything else, by just showing up and doing the next small thing. He'd ask about his grandmother and I'd tell him about her. Not the polished version, the real one. The time she laughed so hard at one of her own jokes that she pulled her IV line loose. The way she insisted on lipstick even when she couldn't get out of bed. Said a woman could be dying, but she didn't have to look it. The morning she took my hand and called me the daughter she should have raised. Why didn't she just tell me? He asked once. If she wanted you to have everything, why keep it a secret? Because you were her grandson, I said, and she loved you, but she knew you weren't ready to hear it. None of you were. I thought hard about selling the house those first weeks. Every room ached with the shape of her absence. But in the end, I couldn't do it, and not for the reasons you might think. It wasn't the 4 bedrooms or the 40 acres or what a real estate agent in Peterborough told me it might fetch. It was the 11 years. It was the love that had grown up between 2 women who started out as strangers and became, by the end, the realest family either of us had. It was the fact that this had been the one place on earth where somebody saw me clearly after my own husband was gone and my own son was a province away. So I stayed. I didn't start a foundation. I didn't make speeches. People kept telling me I should do something with the money. Something grand, and I let them talk. What I actually did was quieter than that. Eunice had been a quilter before her hands gave out. There were 3 half-finished quilts in the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, pinned and basted and never finished. I taught myself that first long winter to quilt. I finished all 3. I gave the first to the hospice in town for the family room where people wait. I gave the second to the constable who'd taken my statement. The one with the kind, tired eyes, because she'd treated me like a person on the worst week of my life. The third I kept on my own bed, and I sleep under it still. Trent started coming out even when there was nothing to do. He'd split firewood, change my snow tires, sit at the kitchen table and just talk. I watched my son turn back into somebody I recognized, somebody better than the boy who'd flown home and flown away without looking at me. One Sunday in spring, he was out back, turning over the old vegetable garden, Eunice's garden, gone to weeds the last few years, and he stopped and leaned on the spade and said, "She knew, didn't she? She knew exactly what they were going to do." "She suspected," I said, "and she protected me the only way she had left, with the truth written down where they couldn't get at it. I wish I'd known her better." "You can know her," I said, "through what she did. At the end, when it counted, she chose to stand up for somebody who'd never have stood up for herself. You can know everything that mattered about her from that. We planted lilacs that spring, the 2 of us, along the fence line where Eunice used to sit in her wheelchair on the good days with her face turned up to the sun. She'd loved lilacs. The smell of them in May, she always said, was the smell of the whole world deciding to forgive itself. It was late that night, alone in the house that was finally and irrevocably mine, that I found the last note. I pulled the photo albums out again, the ones I'd rescued from Russell's Toss the Rest pile, and I was going through them slow baby pictures of Murray, Eunice young and laughing on her own wedding day. 100 ordinary afternoons that hadn't seemed like anything at the time and were everything now. And tucked behind the very last page, in that same slanting hand, was one more letter. "My dear girl," it said, "if you're reading this, then it all worked, and you're home, and you're safe. I'm sorry I didn't give you more while I was living. More thanks, more credit, more standing between you and the people who took you for granted, my own children, chief among them. I couldn't undo all those years. But I could do this. So here it is, the last thing I have to give you, and it isn't money, it's permission. Permission to stop making yourself small. Permission to stop swallowing your own needs to leave room for everybody else's. You have spent your whole life building comfort for other people. Build something for your own self now. You've earned the right to take up the whole room. With all my love, your Eunice." I cried then. The first real crying I'd done since the cemetery. Not only grief, though there was plenty of that. Something more tangled. Relief. Gratitude. And underneath it all, rising up slow and strange and unfamiliar after all those years, something that I can only call freedom. I'm 63 years old. I own a brick farmhouse and 40 acres and a lilac hedge that isn't much yet, but will be. I have a son who learned, late but not too late, how to show up. I sleep under a quilt. I finished with my own 2 hands. And I was loved, fiercely and to the very end, by a woman who started out a stranger and saw me more clearly than anyone in my life ever had, clearly enough to fight for me from the far side of the grave. There is no house and no amount of money in the credit union worth more than that. But I'll tell you the truth. It is awfully nice to have the house.